I've started the recording now. So yeah, recording on this computer. Okay, good. Okay, so I've actually muted everyone in the room, just for better quality, so that we don't hear background noises from the others who might have some things going on in the background. But let's pick off where we started last time, and feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask any questions, or you just want to answer my questions. Also, if you don't feel like talking, then you can always send a chat to me privately. Um, Feel free to that also. So last week we saw that. We saw what happens black to play, and we also saw some basic positions with king on the 6th rank. So just for the sake of completeness, let's just see the position of king on the 6th rank and what that means. So during the game, like when you're thinking on any given position, it's very important to know as a chess player whose turn it is to play, because that determines the outcome of the outcome of the game. So who wins, or if it's a draw. But then there are certain positions in which it just doesn't matter who it is to play. The evaluation of the position does not end. So normally, whenever we are thinking on any given position, we are calculating variations, and then at the end of the variation, we want to evaluate. And the evaluation is like the second critical part of a chess thinking process. So we want to calculate and then evaluate. And coming back to evaluations, we are looking at a position where the evaluation is white wins regardless of who it is to play. So if it is white to play, white will win. If it is black to play, white will still win. So regardless of white to play, black to play, the result of the game, the evaluation of the position does not change. And that's something which is very valuable to us. So let's just refresh our memories from last week on what this position is. So basically, the king is on the 6th rank and it is on the file of the pawn. So when you have a situation like this, when there are only two kings, we are interested in getting our king to the 6th rank and in the file of the pawns, right? So we want the king on e6 in this instance, in this position. So the position of the pawn really doesn't matter. So as we discussed, the pawn could be on square e2, or it could be on e5. It doesn't matter. Once we get the king on e6, white's win is guaranteed, right? So it's super important that you know this elemental position. This is like the first lesson. So you should have your king on the 6th rank, on the file of the pawn, and the rank 6, right? Okay, so white to play. Let's say this position is now white to play. So if white to play, I just move my king to f6. We'll see how white wins when it is white's turn to play. So king f6. Black has only a few options: king d7, king d8, or king f8. If he goes on d7 or king d8, it doesn't matter. I just play king f7, and we know that this is now a winning position because the pawn just keeps going forward and then it queens. And then we all know how to checkmate with the lone queen. And if it goes to f8, then this is like the path of most resistance. This is like the best defense from black, because black is not allowing the white king to come to these squares from where it can support the pawn. So one other thing we discussed last week, which is to identify the goals of each side. In this position, white's goal is to promote the pawn. White wants to promote his pawn to queen. That is white's goal. And since chess is a game of two sides, black's goal will always be the opposite of what is white's goal. So black wants to prevent white from promoting that pawn. So black will play moves which will give the most stubborn resistance to what white wants to achieve. So king f8 does not right, it doesn't draw, but it's like the most stubborn resistance because I'm preventing the white king from coming to the 7th rank and help push the pawn. But still, it doesn't matter. I play e6 here. Now again, black's king has two options: king g8 or king e8. If king g8, I just play e7, and now black cannot stop white's pawn from queen. Right. There is another way that white can play, which is king e7, and then he can place king to d7, and then push the pawn to the queen square. Right. So there are these two alternatives. The fastest is obviously e7 and queen. Okay, so king g8 is not the best defense. The best defense is king e8. And it's the best defense because black does not want white to queen his pawn, so he's putting his king on the square of the queening square. So, but still e7, and now black's king has to make way for white's pawn, right? So, and I play king f7, and then now I can queen my pawn. So white's king was able to control the queening square, and now he's queening his pawn. So if it's white's turn to play, I just move my king. He moves his king, e6. He plays king back to e8, e7, king d7, and now king f7, right? So white is able to queen his pawn when it is his turn to play. Now let's see what happens if it is black's turn to play in this position. Any variation? If it's black's turn to play, he has two choices: king d8 or king f8, and whatever he plays. Let's say he plays king d8. I just come king f7, and now white's king is controlling all three squares for pushing his pawn. Now he can push his pawn to queen, right? So white will queen his pawn. If he plays king f8, then white goes the other way, and again he's controlling the squares so that he can help push his pawn to the queening square. So we took the analogy of like the king as like an adult, and the pawn like a kid on a bicycle, and the king is helping the pawn to go to the queening square. And in both cases, white wins, right? And king f7 also, it's plus minus, right? And this is also plus minus. All right, so this position is super critical, right? So I'll just say that insert diagram here. So this is a critical position. This is something you should know. Actually, it's also helpful to know this position because the position of the pawn doesn't matter. So once the king is on that same file and rank, the pawn can be on 2nd rank or 3rd rank or 4th rank or 5th rank. It doesn't matter. Once the king is on 6th rank, then you just go and win. All right. So this is first grade first lesson. Now let's go to first grade second lesson. Let's save this. Okay, let's say there's something in the game for now. Okay. Now the second position that we are interested, the second lesson of our class is this. So in this, the position is slightly changed. The king is not on the 6th rank. So right. So, and in this lesson, we'll learn why the 6th rank is so important. Like why it's so crucial to have that king on the 6th rank. Why 6th rank is different from the other other ranks, say the 5th, 4th, or the 3rd and 2nd rank. So why these are so? Why having the king or 6th rank makes such a difference? So last week we saw this position with black to play, right? So let's refresh that. Black to play, black wants to give the best defense possible, right? So legally, black has like 5 moves: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Of these, I think getting your king on the last rank are the worst. Like they are much bad than the other 2 options. And the reason is simple. Like, so once you go on the 8th rank, can anyone guess what should be white's move here based on the lesson we just covered? Based on the first lesson, what should be white's move here?
He'll move to e6.
Awesome, yeah. So king to e6, right? So we know that once king comes to e6, I'm winning. I put my king on the 6th rank, and then I just push my pawn to 5th rank, and then I know I'm winning, regardless of who to play. I just keep on queening my pawn, right? So king goes to d8. Again, it's the same thing, king e6, and then I push my pawn. Same thing with king f8, blah, 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 king e6, right? So it wins. So I'll just put the evaluations at the end of the variations. So plus minus means plus is for white and minus is for black. It means white is winning. These are some annotations. Actually, these are some notation that chess players use pretty widely. They are very standard notations used in chess books. So you'll get used to them. I don't think they are that serious to cover in these lessons. You can just go and Google them. All right. So king e8, king going to 8th rank is not the best. So let's say he plays king to d7. Now white basically needs to bring his king to the 6th rank and on e6. So right. So this is white's eventual goal is to checkmate black's king. But before I can checkmate black's king, I have another goal, which is queening my pawn. Now, before I can queen my pawn, there is another goal, right? So let's say we have like a series of goals. The eventual goal is to queen the pawn. The goal before that is to bring the king to 6th rank. And the goal even before that is to, like have this technique on how to get the king to 6th rank, right? So king d7, what will white play here? Does anyone remember what white does here? What we saw?
King f6.
Okay.
King f6.
King f6, right? And say I play king to d6. What does white do here?
Can I talk?
The pawn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you push the pawn, right? Because now if the king starts covering the queening square, this is going to be a big blunder, right? So this is going to be, I'll say, this is a blunder. Double question mark. Why is it a blunder? Because now the king will just go and take white's pawn. So it'd be stupid of white to, like cover the queening pawn, cover the queening square, which is e8, if he is going to leave his pawn alone. So the king is like the adult, like the parent helping the child ride his bicycle. So you cannot go too far ahead. You cannot be left too far behind. So you have to take the pawn with you. So e5, and let's say black plays something like king d7. What does white play now?
f7.
Pawn.
F7.
Pawn e6.
I suppose pawn e6 works in this instance, but let's stick to our principles. The principle is that white's king should go and cover the squares on which the pawn will be going, right? So the pawn is trying to go to e8. So the principle is that the king should cover, like protect the squares or cover the squares on which the pawn will be going. So I guess e6 also works. So pawn push e6 works, but I don't think it's the most principled way to play e6, king e8, and now what? e7, right? And then king d7, and then you can play king f7. So e6 also works, but I'm just gonna put this as an alternative. Let's just say this is an alternative move. Okay, but king f7 is a better move. The king, I just put a text here.
Okay, white.
White's king. White's king should control the squares on which the pawn is supposed to go. Right. So let's just say it like this, and then white wins, right? And what do we have? So king f6. So king d7, black to play, black plays king d7, king f6. So if king d6, I push the pawn, and then white wins. If he plays king e8, what does white play now?
Pawn e5.
E6.
Yeah, I mean pawn.
E6.
Yeah, king e6. Yes, I guess e5, pawn e5 probably also wins, but again want to emphasize the principle that get your king on the 6th rank. Get your king on the 6th rank and the square, which is also on the file. So the king was already on the 6th rank on f6, but it was not on the file of the pawn. So that does not, so if you don't bring your king to e6, then we still are not sure if white is winning. So we want to bring the king to e6 first, and then white is winning. Then we know that white is how to win this position. So we are basically, calculation is about making your job easier, right? So first you got to know about these positions. You just got to memorize certain positions, like there is no alternative to that. So you need to have a good memory. If you want to become a good chess player, or you want to play good chess, you need to have a good memory, or you need to make effort on memorizing some stuff. And this is one of those instances. You just got to know this position, that king on 6th rank and the file of the pawn is winning. So you bring the king there, and then you push the pawn, and then you win, right? So that's the thing there. So white wins when it's black's turn to play. Let's see king f7. What does white play here now? If king f7?
D5.
I'm sorry? What?
D6.
Yeah, king d5 is a
King D6.
bad move because you don't do anything here. Black can just play king e7.
King D6 actually.
Right. So you're trying to bring your king to this square. Sorry. To e6. So, but you cannot do that. So you have this technique called as bypassing. We will see this in much detail in the ensuing lessons. So king d6. I'm gonna mute all. All right. The king d6. Let's say king f6. So basically this is just the mirror position of what happened earlier. D7, and now again I control all the 3 squares, right? So it's just the kings have swapped sides. And if he plays king e8, then again, what does white play here? Anyone? What does white play here?
E5.
E6. E6.
King e6. No e5. King e6. Bring the king to the 6th rank and the file of the pawn. If you get the chance, do it immediately, and then you win. Right? So don't be in a hurry to push the pawns. Right? I mean, the pawn cannot do much on its own. You have to position your king on the right square. So once you bring the king to e6, we know that white wins. So see, this sort of information now makes your job much easier when you're calculating like complex problems. Now you're basically broken down a big problem, which is checkmating the black king into steps, like a steps of small problems. So the first step is bring the king to e6, is to bring the king on the 6th rank. Then queen the pawn. Then use the queen to checkmate the black king. So, and that's how we make these problems manageable for our thinking. Otherwise, like you can easily get bogged down by variations. So thinking is a process that you really need to work on and obviously practice. But I'm trying to emphasize why it's so important to develop a thinking process and understand the principles behind it. Now, in certain cases, exceptions do work, right? But you should, as far as possible, if you stick to the principles, your job becomes much easier. All right, so we have seen the starting position with black to play. Now let's try this position with white to play. So I guess that was the homework. If you guys got a chance to work on it, solve it, get an answer, great. I can ask for feedback, but if not, we'll be seeing it today anyway. So before I continue looking at this position with white to play, does anyone have any suggestions on how white will continue or which move white will play, and what's your evaluation? So our two-pronged approach, the variation and the evaluation. What is the evaluation with white to play of this position?
King f5.
Now, so move and your evaluation. I'm not interested only in moves. I want the evaluation at the end of it. Or just give me the evaluation, actually, to be fair.
White wins.
White wins with white to play?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one guy. What about the others? If you want to text me, like send a chat on what the evaluation is, you can do that. If you don't feel comfortable speaking, if you're shy, that's fine. You can text me privately. I am interested in knowing the evaluation of this position with white to play. With black to play, white wins. We saw that. If it is black's turn to play, white wins. But what is the evaluation when it is white's turn to play? So one of you has said it's white wins. Anyone else?
White wins.
White wins. Awesome.
White wins.
White wins. Okay. White wins. White wins.
White wins.
White wins. All right.
White
This
wins.
is. I've seen this. This thing before, where once if someone says something, then everyone tries to follow the herd.
Draw.
Draw. Okay, now we have someone contrasting it. Okay, that's interesting. All right, seems like we have a mostly white wins, and someone is saying a draw. So, okay, let's ask the people who are saying that white wins how white will win. Okay, so what move white will play here?
King f5.
I'm sorry?
King f5.
Right, okay. So I guess white has two good alternatives, king d5 and king f5, and they're basically mirrors of each other. Let's start with king f5, okay? And once we finish the variation with king f5, we'll come to king d5. So king f5. Now I'm going to play from the black side, okay? So let's say king f5. What is black's goal? Can anyone just share that with the group? What is black's goal here?
Black's goal is to stop the pawn from promoting.
Okay, yes. So black's goal is to stop the pawn from white pawn from promoting. Okay. Now that's a very good answer. Yes, that is black's goal. To achieve that goal, black has to go through a series of mini goals, and one of those mini goals is obstructing the white king, right? So white's goal is to queen the pawn, but to achieve that, what white does is that he uses his king to guide the pawn, right? So he uses his king to guide the pawn to the queening square. So black, in turn, to stop that, he will obstruct white's king to cover these squares. So having said that, I think what move should black play here?
King F7.
Right. So I'm putting my king directly in opposition to the white king, and by doing that, what I'm trying to do is basically I'm trying to prevent the white king from coming to the 6th rank. Right? So that's the principle behind it. Black will try to stop the white king from coming forward. So best defense is king f7, king d7 is the other alternatives are not, not the best, because then white's king will come to f6 and he will start encroaching. So let's see black's best defense, which is king f7. Okay, white win, guys. What does white play here?
5.
Pawn E5.
Push pawn, right? Okay, you push the pawn. Let's say I do the same thing with black's king. Black's king will just try to put the stubborn defense. So I'll put the king in front of the pawn and also try to cover some squares so that white king is not able to come on the 6th rank. Okay, white win, guys. What does white play here?
Pawn E6.
Pawn E6.
Pawn E6. Should white bring his king to 6th rank?
No.
We've been talking about 6th rank a lot. Why not?
Because then
Because the pawn is isolated.
Right. Yeah. So the pawn becomes isolated, right? So the king should go together with the pawn. Well, not resign. It will be a draw. White does not need to resign. It will be a draw, but white does lose half the point. So yeah, e6 makes the most sense here. And now this is a very, very critical point for black. So black has two good options, king e8 and king f8, or king d8, perhaps king d8, but we'll just consider these two. Which one should he play?
King E8.
F8.
King F8.
King e8, king f8.
E8.
All right. So it seems like both moves look
F8.
equally appealing, right? So f8 and e8 looks equally appealing. Let's cover them one by one. So king f8, let's say black plays king f8. I'll just put another diagram position in here because I think this is a very crucial position. What move black plays here really changes the result of the game. So let's see what happens after king f8. So king f8, white continues on his quest to push his pawn. King f6, now king e8.
King E8.
Right, and then white plays e7, and king d7 and king f7, and now white is able to queen his pawn. Okay, so after king f8, it seems that white wins, right? So is it fair to say that white wins in this position, or do we need to look at more alternatives?
I think that if he moves to king E8, it could be a draw.
It could be a draw. Okay. So we saw one variation that after which white wins, but that does not mean that the white wins in the original position. So we need to see another variation, which is king e8. Okay. So king e8. Now let's see what happens. What will white play here?
King
guys?
F.
King F6, right? So King F6, he does the same thing. Now I play King F8.
Now you have to move the pawn.
E7.
So you play E7, and now I play King E8. What does white play now?
King E6.
King A6, right?
Then it's a draw.
Then it's a draw.
And it's a stalemate and it's a draw. Right? So something is going on here. Something is definitely going on here. Right? So let's see from the top. So King F5, King F7, E5. So I mean, there is no other alternative, or white can just repeat, or white can just play King E5, and then I play King E7. And again, we are just repeating positions here. So E5, King E7, E6, and now King E8 is the brilliant move, which saves the game for black. And actually, we see that there is no way for white to progress here. I mean, after King E8, it's a draw, whatever white plays. So if white plays King F6, King F8, E7, and this leads to a stalemate, it's a draw. And say after King E8, he plays like King D5, like say white waits, then all black does is just stay in front of the pawn. King E5. Again, these two moves will lose. If black plays either of King D8 or King F8, he will lose. King D8, King D6, King E8, E7, and black has to vacate the square. And then white is able to queen his pawn, right? So King D8 or King F8 leads to both these scenarios. So if black goes King D8, white goes King D6. If black goes King F8, what does white play?
King F6.
King F6, yes. King F6, it's just the mirror position. You don't have to do anything else. So King F6, and again he wins. So this is a tricky situation for black. Only one move draws, King E8. Again, I'll give this move double exclamation. So it's a really brilliant move. And basically, this leaves black the option to wait for white's king. So if he plays King D6, then I play King D8, E7, King E8, King E6, and draw. So in this position, let's just consider this position. Because it is white's turn to play, it's a draw. White has to play King E6, and then it's a stalemate, right? But say if it is black to play, does the evaluation change?
No.
Yes.
Yes.
Because black has.
Yes, because now black has to move, and when black moves,
He has to move to F7.
King F7, white can move his king to King D7,
And then the pawn can promote.
making the pawn promote easy.
Exactly. So if this is black to play, white wins. But if this position is white to play, what happens? What's the evaluation?
Black draws.
Draw, right?
Stalemate.
So white to play, this position is a draw. Black to play, this position, white wins. So we are starting to see the nuance of whose turn it is to play in chess. So it matters a lot. Like in any given position, whose turn to play matters a lot. So you have to calculate any given position with that side. So you should know whose turn it is to play, calculate, and then evaluate. And then we want to understand what is the net result of that position. What is the evaluation of that position? So coming back to the starting position, what can we say about this position? If it is black to play, what's the evaluation? Black to play, what is the evaluation of this position? The second lesson.
Win.
Black to play, white wins, right? But if it is white to play, what's the evaluation?
Black draws.
Stalemate.
It's draw. Yeah. So stalemate means draw, right? So the evaluation is a draw. So what we are seeing is that even though the position is the same, right? So it's just the position of the kings is just one rank down the board, and the result of the game is changing. So it's important to know these two positions before we go and solve our main problem. So on the 5th rank, so like if the king is not on the 6th rank, then it will matter whose turn it is to play, and you should keep that in mind. So this position white to play is a draw. But if we go and see the other position, which is this one, are you guys able to see this position, the king on the 6th rank?
No.
All right. I
No.
guess I need to.
Oh, no.
Okay.
No.
All right. But on the 6th rank, white will always win, right?
Yeah.
So there is a very big difference between having the king on the 6th rank and having the king on, let's say, something like the 5th rank. Okay, so this is white wins, and this, you got to know whose turn it is to play. So on the 5th rank, I got to know whose turn it is to play. But on the 6th rank, I don't care. Like white always wins. So those are like the first 2 lessons of your first grade in chess. So with that in mind, let's go back to our problem and try to solve it. Bring up the problem. Okay, so this is our problem from the first lesson, right? Hello?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right, so and this
Yes.
is white to play. This is white to play, and yeah, and then we want to find how white wins here. All right, so let's try to think on this position again. So we tried to solve this position last week, but we did not knew the 2 positions that we needed to know, which is the 6th rank and the 5th rank, right? So like basically 6th rank and not 6th rank. And with that in mind, now let's try to again find white's move, white's first move. Or actually, let's try to calculate variations on what happens. Okay, so I guess most of you were set king c5 or king b5. So these were the 2 alternatives. And I want you to think what happens after each of those moves. So let's say white plays king c5. What will black play here?
Black will play E7, for example.
No. So think on it. No, do not hurry. I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes to think on this. Do not hurry. Whatever you're thinking right now, that's not the right move. And think on the lesson that we just did. The first two lessons, 6th rank and not 6th rank. You got to think on these two lines. You got to use that knowledge to solve this problem. So we want to find out white's correct move in this position. But to find white's correct move, we have to go through a bunch of variations. And what is black's best defense? So I want you guys to think on black's best defense in this position. I'll give you guys around 10 minutes to think. Think on it. Do not waste the time. Think on all the different alternatives that black can play here. Think about the 6th rank stuff that we studied. Think about the not 6th rank, the 5th rank position that we studied. Why black was able to make a draw in that position. Why white is able to win when it is 6th rank. So I want you guys to think about all those things and then come up with an answer. So I'm going to mute all of you. If you have any questions, you can send a chat to me directly. You guys have 3 more minutes. Most of you are sending me single moves in the text chat, So again, I will repeat this. I want you to calculate entire variations, and you can stop your variations when you think you have a conclusion, which is the evaluation at the end of the variation. So if you think you can stop your variations because white will win, black will win, then you can stop your variations. But a calculation should always be accompanied with a corresponding evaluation. Without having an evaluation, calculations don't mean much. So calculate variations, like what will black play, then how white will answer to that, how black will answer to white's answer, then black answer, then white answer. So this is like a ping pong, right? So think on those lines. I'll give you an additional 2 minutes and then ping you. But I want evaluation in terms of white win, black win, or draw. And also calculate accurate variations. All right. Let's stop calculating. So yeah, you guys have sent me some very interesting variations on for this position, and it's good. I mean, I guess most of you are doing a good job with calculation. So chess. So let's again come back to what calculation means in chess, what the process looks like, and what's the ideal way for that. So when I say calculation and evaluation, I'm meaning that we want to calculate variations, right? So it's not just single moves. So some of you, like during the start, were just blurting out moves for black, like king d7 or king e7. But blurting out moves really doesn't help a lot when you're playing a game. When you're playing a chess game, you're actually making lots of decisions throughout the game. You're going actually through a series of mini decisions until the game is over. So when you're calculating, it's not just that you need to see one move. So like when I say like black to play, I'm not expecting just king d7. I'm expecting full variations. And the way to get to that is again by restating the goals of each side. Okay, so let's like we can try to formulate white's goals and black's goals in this position. Now, in a very abstract sense, we can say white's goal is to win, black's goal is to win, but those are too abstract of a goal. At this point, we can, like in the given position, we can say that white's king is a bit advanced, or like it's a bit better placed. So our goals are basically formed from the current position. So you got to first evaluate the current position that you're given, the position that you have on board. You should first evaluate that to form your goals, and then start the calculation from there. So when I look at the current position, this given position, I see that white's king is a bit active. It's more active than black's king. So, and white's pawn is also a bit more advanced than black's pawn. So this basically tells me that white has a sort of advantage here, and so black would be lucky to get a draw here, right? I mean, that's sort of my first impression, but things can change. So from the given position, I would say that black's goal will be try to find a draw, like an equality position, and white's goal will be trying to find a position from which he can win. So let's try to go through a bunch of variations in this position. So most of you have started with the king positions, with king moves, okay? And that's very interesting, considering that we just finished our like two lessons. So king e7 or king d7 were most of the suggestions here.
That old man behind Daddy's chair.
I'm sorry. All right, I'll just mute the participants for now. So actually, what happens when say black plays his king to d7? Say white plays something like e5. Or king c7, and then king b5. Something like this can happen, but it's an equality. What about king b5? What does black play here? You can unmute yourself now. We are having an interactive interactive session now. Thinking time is over, so let's open up the session. What of a king b5? I think then black's king can get activated here. King c4, king e5, and king d3. So I guess black's king gets activated here, and maybe he has a draw here. But let's try to use the principles that we have seen in the previous lesson. Okay, so say if black plays king e7 here, which I think many of you suggested, white plays e5. And the thing is that now it's really difficult for black to stop white from taking white's from this pawn. And once white takes black's pawn on e6, white's king will be where? Where will white's king be when he takes the black pawn? It will be on the 6th rank, and it will be on the same file as the pawn. So king e7, actually. So king e7, e5, and now it's, as I said before, that it's pretty difficult for black to stop white from taking this pawn. So let's see plays king d7, then king b6, king e7, king c6, king f7, king d7, and eventually black has to let go of that pawn, and white takes the pawn, and his king is on the 6th rank, which is a fantastic square for that king to be in. And white wins here. We know that. White will always win in this position, regardless of whose turn it is to play. So king e7, white just plays e5 and fixes this pawn on the 6th rank. And that's like our big clue here. Let's try another variation. Let's say black plays king f7. Again, white plays e5. And let's say he plays king g6. Now, my question is, can white play king d6? Does white win after king d6? Anyone? Anyone has any opinions if white wins after king d6 or not? Because during the game, we are always making decisions, the decision of which move to play. So I need to know, so some guys are having problem unmuting. So let me unmute. Yes, so what does white win after king d6?
No, I think he loses. Draw.
Loses, right? So
No,
king
he
d6.
loses.
Yes. So king d6 is a pretty bad move because after king f5, it's a mutual zugzwang, a position which we saw last week. So after king f5, white has to move his king, and then he will lose. He will lose his e5 pawn, and then he loses. Right. So king d6 is a pretty bad move, but king c6. And now white uses the same tactic of mutual zugzwang. White uses the same tactic of mutual zugzwang on black. So now if black plays king f5, then white plays king d6. And now it is black's turn to play, and so black loses. So black will have to move his king away from the pawn in any of these squares, and then white will take the e6 pawn and he wins. Right? So king c6. I guess this is a brilliant move. So basically, white is waiting for black king to come to f5. And so black also tries to use the same trick, which is king g5. So again, he wants white to come to d6 so that he can come to king f5. So the fight is now revolved around who gets to be in that mutual zugzwang position with the other side to play. So if white plays king d6, king f5, black wins. But now white plays king d7. Now he's attacking the pawn. And black is now forced to play king f5. And then white plays king d6. and now white is winning because now it's a mutual zugzwang. This is a very tricky variation, so you might need to work around it yourselves after the lesson a bit, but you'll get to it. But this is a very fantastic concept, right? So king f7, e5, king g6, and now the very obvious looking move, king d6, actually loses, right? And so we again see how mutual zugzwang positions work. So if it's your turn to play, you lose. So basically you have to wait in such situations. Sorry about that. King c6, white waits. Then black also waits. Black does not come to f5. Black plays king f5. Then he loses. King g5. And then white goes to d7, forcing black king to come to f5. And then he comes king d6. And now he wins. So very tricky concept here, but I think this is a very fascinating variation just to look at. So king f7, king e7, white wins, but after king d7, I think black has a draw here. Because say now if white plays e5, then black has this thing called as opposition, which we'll again be studying in future lessons. So this is this particular situation that the kings go through is called as opposition. But basically what happens is that black gets the opposition, and now white has no way to progress. He plays king b5, black plays king b7. King d7 would be a mistake. So if black does not takes the opposition, then white's king gets to enter black's territory and attack the e6 pawn. And basically now white will just drive the black king away. King e7, king c6, and it's the same thing overall. King d7, and then I take the pawn. Or if black's king just goes to the last rank, then again the same thing, king c6, king e8, king d6, king f7, king d7. And again white takes the pawn on e6. So king c5, I guess I have, after king c5, king d7 is the right move. It's at least one of the right moves for black to get a draw, because if white plays e5, then I just stop the white king from penetrating into the black position. The white cannot go into the black position, and wherever the white king goes, the black king just stays in front of it, and then it's a draw. Obviously, if white king goes back to any of these squares is like not the best move for white, then black king will actually get the chance to come and attack white's pawn. So these are actually bad choices for white's king, and the most optimal result here is draw. So this position is a draw by best play from both sides. White plays the best moves, black plays the best moves, and then it's a draw. So that's what I mean by that. So after king c5, king d7 draws, and say white does not play e5. Okay, we know that e5 draws, but what are the moves white can play? If it goes king b5 or king b4, then black's king just comes ahead and then starts attacking white's pawn, and black's king gets activated. So this is again, I would say, like equality, because white just has to come back, and then he defends his pawn, and then it's draw, right? So it's equal. And if he plays king c4, then the same thing happens. King d6, king d4, then he can push his pawn, and again we have the situation of opposition, and then again it's a draw. So after king c5, king d7, and it's very likely that I mean, we have basically seen all the options, so it's it's a draw. So it's just not likely that it's a draw. It is a draw for king d7. Black is able to defend against white's king activity, and then it's a draw. So king c5, we saw one variation, right? So king c5, it leads to a draw, but how about king b5? And I think this is again something that you guys can take for homework. And chess is a very nuanced game, actually. So just one square difference between c5 and b5 can make a lot of difference. So now my question is, after king b5, what will black play here? So you guys can take this position as a homework if you want to. If you don't, that's fine. We will be covering this position in next week. So again, the question still remains, like this is our original position. We want to find out white's best move here and how white will, what white should play. Does white win in this position, or is it a draw? We have seen one variation, which is king c5, and after king c5, we can conclude that it's a draw because we have seen enough variations. We have seen king d7, we have seen king f7, and we have seen king e7. So we have seen all three alternatives that it's a draw. Actually, in these two variations, white wins, but king d7 is the variation where black can draw. So king c5 is a draw, but now we need to figure out what happens after king b5. And I think we can finish this position in the next week. We'll see the other alternatives, which is king c4 and e5. And then we will basically see all the variations for all the alternatives of white and see what happens in each of those variations and work on our calculations. But the main thing is that you got to remember the first lesson and the second lesson, which is the king on the 6th rank and the king on the 5th rank, because that's going to come into play when we are finding black's best defense. So to find white's best move, we have to see black's best defense, and then we can find white's best move. All right, so king b5, black to play. Take this as a homework, and we'll meet next week. Any questions?
No.
All right. If you have, feel free to write me an email or on WhatsApp, and we'll meet next week. Okay?
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.